All right, so I hit that play button. We in what they call 2018. I'll let it breathe a little bit, see if this thing is streaming, see if the sound is coming in good. It's amazing to be here. All right. Rolled and jumped in. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get it crunk up in here. Had to definitely say something. It's the first. Uh, wow. What can I say? That last year, that last year, if this year looks anything like last year, it's already set to stage itself for that next quantum leap. Like I'm really looking at all of the stuff happening. I'm looking at the overwhelming response from everyone. Just integrating with more communities and talking to people, and just really, really seeing the enthusiasm that's building in relation to advanced consciousness. Many people are now seeing that it is possible, meaning nothing less than total world harmony. Like it's really important that we just do our best. And, many people can look at themselves and say, hey, when do you ever get an example of your best? And to me, that's, have you ever been in a death-defying situation where, you got to get somewhere, or you need to, assert yourself, or you need to, come alive for that moment. And, you really see just how powerful your consciousness is, just how fast you really are. You see all those things in that moment. Now, of course, if you can bring all that into every single moment, I'm sure 100% that thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people will want to know how you accomplish that, and will just sit there to listen to you tell them, hey, this is how, I'm conducting my energy. So in many cases, those people sitting there can do the same thing, meaning that we all learn from each other. I always mention that. And it's always awesome when you get some knowledge that is wisdom for you, because knowledge is not the application yet. The experience gives you the wisdom because it puts the knowledge into application. So this is like that before point. This is where the knowledge comes across, and then for you to take that and be wise with it, then you will put it into action. But once it reaps some reward, then we can concur that, hey, that works. And that's just what existence is about, is in such a quantum way. Though there's different people on different levels. You could do that with, hey, you succeeded today, and you went on a fast, you went on a diet. Some people on another end that they got, some kind of position that they were looking for. And, so there's different levels of success for everyone. And what I will say now, though, is that now we have to set the bar really high. And for anyone that's in the chat, if you can confirm that you can hear me, that would be great, just by typing it in. But we set the bar really high now, and it's because not only are the applications available, but we are kind of prone to being lulled to sleep. It's like the movie They Live, which is like sleep. And, still with the masses, the overall level of consciousness and awareness, the level of connection. Again, do they say anything to you when they're standing in the store? Are they always seeing what you're doing wrong, but never what you're seeing right? Are they always trying to judge and find someone that they can, put down so they can feel like they're up? Are they inconsiderate at times and not saying, and recognizing you and what you're doing? I'm just saying overall your experience in the world. This could be your boss, somebody you're working for. This could be your significant other. This could be, anything or anyone. Is that the reception that we're getting overall from the reality? And however, I think the answer to that, of course, will be yes, but we're starting to see that on the wane as more people wake up and more people become conscious to who they are, not so much as what's going on in the reality. And because that's one of the things that I find very interesting is when we talk about higher consciousness, because that's would have to be the term, because the word consciousness it needs something else to describe it. So let's say in higher consciousness, you always go through this process of weaning out, what part of yourself is productive for self and what parts aren't. And it's basically like just assessing like your house. Everything that's in that house that you're actually using versus the things that you're not using. And how productive you become when you move the things that you're not using out of the way. How productive sometimes, even if that's people, that they become if you move them out of the way or let them move on with their projection and experience, right? Because if you really think about it, since there's no, well, you would have to know this. You couldn't do any thinking about it. But since there's no time to it, it's timeless. The main aspect of your existence would still hinge upon you coming, let's say in and out of what we would call physical planes, because there's multiple layers here. There's multiple layers. There's a physical layer, there's a spiritual layer, there's a mental layer, there's multiple layers here. So that whole process, which is what we are and what we exist as together collectively, it's almost like you got people who are defeatists. They retreat from that. It's just too much for them to comprehend. And I agree, you can't really do that with your mind. And then you have others who don't have as great expectations. Like I was looking at this article today, and it was talking about how, what were they saying, that why it's pretty much impossible for us to imagine that there's other intelligent life anywhere or near us or around us, and why we will never discover that. And this kind of hit like the front page or main page of Forbes or something like that, big magazines. I mean, it's just so hilarious because it's like the extraterrestrial, like if we ever want to know where are the aliens, just like if you look not only at the life forms, but also other people around you, different cultures, if you can't see the alien, you have to be blind, meaning that if you can't see something that is integrated at times differently than your perception, and this is why we know that the perceptions are also the illusion in their judgments, because just because I perceive that I'm not connected to something, or I perceive, like, let's say a bird is flying, can I fly right now? Can I just, and as many times as I could do it, if I think about it, will I start rising off the ground? Now, of course, optimists will tell you yes, but honestly, have you seen anyone do it? And even if someone can, since that percentage is so small, let's just agree that it's more important about why we can't flap our hands and fly, okay? And because that's alien to us, right? And until we learn another level of communication and language, which of course could just be in your dreams, which could be on a platform in which you can use it, only then you would see how, what is your connection to that bird, right? And because of that, that means that you have all these aliens, or basically those who have been separated, this alienation going on multiple layers, to where the little difference that people have, which they love to hold on to, it's like, I'm a Scorpio, or I'm a Libra, or, I'm a path number, whatever difference they have, I'm white, whatever difference they have, they like to push that out as, hey, know that I'm not like you. And it's like, when you're super awake, it does come across as kind of strange and offensive even on the planet, only because, not that, sometimes people need their time to go through their own projection, but the sheer knowing that if for one moment that we band literally together, if we would come together and make the complete whole, we can solve any, let's say, catastrophic, futuristic, diabolical plan, meaning that the healing, which is us naturally, I'm going to show you why the healing is you naturally. Like if you cut yourself, it heals naturally. You don't necessarily have to say, please heal, like you would be asleep while it's still doing the healing, right? So we heal naturally. So that means that with any type of quantum leap for us as a species, then everything that has been hurt becomes healed. It becomes whole again. But to accomplish that, of course, it's like attempting to put pieces together and then finding out certain things don't fit. I think all I've done personally for the last, let's say, 7 years of also teaching and instructing on this type of subject and this level is really also just for myself. Like when you say, hey, hey, I want to change things. I want to be like massive. I want to be a, earth mover. When you say that to yourself, the only thing you're saying is, hey, I'm ready for the training of contrast. That's what you're saying. You're not saying, hey, now everything's going to be like you won the lottery. You're saying that every single thing that's going to prove by truth that I really learn and know about these different things, about connections with people, about, you name it, just all, different realms, other entities, cars and engines and combustion and free energies and all of those different things. When you say, I'm ready to become aware of who I truly am, that's actually what's agreeing to be, that's what you're agreeing to flood in. So when all that knowledge floods in, and that's why I was saying earlier, it's about figuring out who you are internally yourself first before you ever try to go out and figure out this. Because if you don't know who you are, everything here is just going to appear like you feel like you are. That's what it is. It's just a mirror. So you can live in a very, let's say, shitty mood inside of a palace because it's basically who you are at that point. If you're feeling that, if you're vibrating that, and you're resonating that, then that's where you're going to be. So with that simple knowledge, though, it also means that we can gather things that resonate entirely different frequencies and surround ourselves by that. And that would be our form of communication with it. That would be our way of reaching into a higher level of intelligence and communication. And sure enough, since this began, if people look at the earlier videos, my strongest interests were in things like cymatics as another language after the closing of the book of the realization of what was going on with English. Many other different things I looked into, but it was cymatics that really showed the power of there being an all-encompassing language that other things pay attention to and use as a form of communication versus when you say, hey, bird, come over here, and it doesn't understand what you're saying because you're not speaking English, that could equal a discommunication or a disconnection between you and that bird. But the thing is that I was seeing that disconnection between human beings and other animals alike. So that's what let me know that, hey, if we start learning another language here, then we will progress differently than we progressed before within this last language or this last program. So that's why I set out to break a lot of the boundaries that we're surrounded by, like us, like we just do it to ourselves. You're not supposed to believe in that. You're not supposed to, you're supposed to believe in that. You need to pick that up. You need to. So this is literally a part of our consciousness that we think as ourselves that constantly talks to us every day based on the programming in which it's received from a conflicted reality, tells us what to do based on that information. We think that it's us and then we go act out and do that. Even if we don't necessarily feel comfortable about it, it still overrides us. And I'll say like simple situations like going to church all the time, okay, and listening to this crazy ass doctrine, this whole thing it stinks to high heaven what it's saying just because it doesn't even make sense logically, it doesn't make sense historically. There's a lot going on in there, but yet the person's still in there. Why? Because programming. So if you can't imagine also that it could happen to you, meaning programming doesn't end in, let's say, the church. It doesn't end in video games. It doesn't end in music videos. It's a continuous thing. So you always constantly have to watch yourself to say, well, hey, am I being programmed? Like, am I, especially to be static? Because the only way you can really avoid all of that kind of programming that seeks to understand you and understanding means that it just knows what you're going to do next. Seeks to understand you because it can know what you're going to do next. So it needs you to just stay where you are. The only way that you can overcome something like that is to move in mysterious ways, to continuously blossom difference that as you're progressing, because you're like, hey, okay, I digest that. I get that. I understand that. Now I'm going to move on to the next level. So then you go to the next level. You start digesting that. I'm able to add that with what I had before. It is creating a more complete picture for me. Or I can't even use the word complete because I don't even know how big it is. Let me go on to the next thing. So you go on to the next thing. Then you gain more awareness. Now, what happens, though, if you're not going on to the next thing? What happens if you're still, let's say, quote unquote, down here with your ideas of what you think is going on? You're still playing the game with yourself that for like I said, if you don't know something, then all of a sudden you're aware of it without doing any searching, any seeking, any of that. That's what I was talking about is the sober estimate of self. So we began this making a sober estimate of self. And this is why we talked heavily about cleansing the body, cleansing the consciousness, working on that change, like being able to be flexible. Like I say in most exercises or most things that allow you to be more flexible, you become more flexible in the mind, right? But then get ready because it was still just training. Training in a sense that while you were experiencing your microcosmic life, there was a macrocosmic thing also going on, that there's a massive movement, a massive calling, a massive story, and all of this ready to happen and happening actually right here on the same planet that you're on. So it means that this creation is so twofold in many respects, that you have yourself to get together and yourself to build and to learn these principles. And then you also have to pay attention to what's going on also in the reality that you exist in because of what just is accessible to you here. It doesn't have to always be negative. It doesn't have to always be, yeah, I got to pay attention to what's going on because I may need to move, or they may drop a bomb, or the economy may be over. No, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, hey, peep out what's happening here. There's some stuff, like I said, in nature. There's some stuff in this geometry, like there's certain arcs where you hear like the sounds in your head versus how normal sound carries. There's some patterns that do strange things and appear as if they're moving. No matter if you print them or not, they appear as if they're moving, but they're static. They're supposed to be still. Why? And if we're constantly addressing, let's say, what's being put out on the media or what's even being put out in the conscious community and all those different things, we're constantly addressing that, and we haven't began at the beginning like, hey, but just understand yourself. Forget about all of that out there. That right there, that's the enigma. You're going to have to crack the enigma code to figure that out. It's best to figure out self because that's where you'll gain the highest level of appreciation and value. Why? Well, that's kind of obvious. If you invest in yourself, no one can take that investment away from you. You buy some shoes in a couple weeks. Let me grab some water here. In a couple weeks, the shoes will be worn down. Here it is. The shoes will be worn down. A couple months, you got to go buy another pair of shoes. You put something in your consciousness, it's able to be transmuted. See, many people, because they don't know, they're all guessing. So it's like, oh, well, no, none of this leaves when we leave here at all. I've been hearing some stuff that it's like, why don't you just go back and read what the ancestors said instead of guessing? Like how this really works is your entire experience here forge your next level of experience. Now, the time gap, that is actually what can be removed when you go into what is called the next level, where you don't perceive life and death as you did before. You're out of the clutches of time. You're out of the vacuum. And even though they've been able to prove this in physics and prove this all over the place, it doesn't mean that people have adaptations for this right away. It's kind of like the old cryptocurrency thing. It's not like the world is ready right now to switch over to trying to use these applications and that's all in the store and all the stuff they use it. No. So it's all in respect, a lot of the same thing. It's based on how much time and how much energy and investigation you're doing in it and how much awareness you already have. It's based on a lot of things, right? How many people that you listen to, that you trust, all those different things are just going to give you a picture of something. And then it's going to be up to you to still load it, to say, okay, I'm applying this in my life, or am I just a collector of information? Because collectors of information, they get tired really fast about what they're hearing. They move on to something else. They can't actually figure out what they learned in there to figure out that it's actually all the same. Every scenario that I've seen that actually worked, laid itself on the physical planes especially, laid itself out exactly like a body. It had a brain, it had a heart, it had all those different parts of the consciousness and what they do, which even the greatest builders can see all of that on that microcosmic level. They can, and that macrocosmic level, they can go in and say, oh, we see why the liver corresponds to this. Look, we have a shell. Let's measure the mathematics. Oh, yes, this particular math seems to always crank out this kind of thing. Hey, check this out. There's this element that actually heals. It does something strange. Let's figure out what's inside of it. They figure out what's inside of it. Hey, that's also inside of that other thing. Do you think that has the same principles? So this is, let's say now at least 300 years of specific factions doing that. That's what alchemy is, doing that, taking Earth apart piece by piece and seeing what is it in this that causes it to act this way, right? Even the big experiment with the human bodies right now is just that. What is it that makes it this way, right? Like, think about just the potential, but still meaning the potential of where things could go, but almost a massive amount of the population being oblivious to how it would even get there, right? And then a small group of the consciousness being aware of it, but also waiting on the time in which things could happen properly for that next level to be delivered. Because if you're the early bloomer, let's say, and you're aware of all this already, you become aware of it much more earlier than everyone else starts to realize what exactly is happening here. Then when the realization starts, it's like, okay, they're now aware a little bit more. Let's take it to the next level. And this is what 2018 is really about. It's about the people who have also been behind the scenes doing a lot of the puppet master in the reality, have given themselves the green light to actually take the entire reality to another level, whatever that looks like. Meaning to take the throttle bar of something like a Donzi and floor it, just to see, okay, this is as much as really going to happen. It's almost like that statement, to hell or bust, or whatever they say. One of those moves at seeing if this is passed on, meaning like the responsibilities, because that's where the divine feminine and the divine masculine comes from. And if you're encased in a male or female body, then you have that mission. So the divine feminine and masculine is there to, just like a mother and father, to assist and to take care of any kind of situation that they become aware of. When they're given the resources to actually be able to do that, the only next phase is to actually do it. So me and my tribe, my team, and those in the collective, all of the people who have connected to it from a resonance level, we just went through, like 2017, to me it was like a blur, meaning that there were so many different things learned. It was like you were forced to go on to the next thing. Then you were even at some point, especially many people who caught the wave early in January, already like, hey, I'm not even going to process this anymore on like an information level, like reading books and trying to like comprehend that mind. I'm only dealing with feeling. And then once you start feeling, like we call it feeling yourself, once you start feeling enough, getting enough of the dead lead, enough of the, the receptors that are all burned out, healed, once you can get life back into the body, like Kassar says, when you could become the human again, then you can actually feel your way into your massive progression. Now, it just so happens that there's enough people on the planet right now, as you can clearly see, that have done that on some levels or another. Some didn't integrate back with the reality at all. They're still up in their caves, or they're still up on a couple levels up where the physical bodies, are retained, can't be seen, and they're there. There was a lot of meditating. There was a lot of projections happening. But the vessels, meaning the actual people that have to do the work, the animation itself, that's what 2018 is about. It's about the actual life, if you may, or energy going into the vessels that are basically burned out. Have you ever really looked at people these days and seen, just like where they're at? You got to have a heart. You got to have some empathy, right? Like there has to be somebody still here alive, right? So many of those people are on this line of examining others and be like, man, it's almost like it brings you to tears, because you're like, man, it's like, what's really going on? But you can't do that too long. You have to start in your mind saying, okay, look, okay. I'm here to bring a resolution. How am I going to bring that resolution? And then you start scanning the reality. I think personally over the last 7 years, what we did was we just went crazy on scanning the reality. Meaning that we checked into, like I said, the language, we checked into substances, we checked into the gods, we checked into other teachers, and, we checked into so many different things to get a bigger picture of the big question, who am I? Why am I here? Then we decided at a certain point, when, everything's like a mirror, you're just talking to yourself saying, who am I? Why am I here? How long are you going to do that before you realize that when does the one observing become, when does the one, that's what it is, when does the one observing become the one that's being observed? And I was on this like, massive journey. Like I decided to go on a journey like 3 days ago. And I just flew out of the seat of my pants. Like the energy was so high, because I haven't been on a journey in like maybe 2-3 months. Just because, you got to stay on the physical plane to get physical things done. And during that experience, because the energy was so high, but I was realizing where the tear is in the mind, the body, and the soul. And it's because in the bodies, you see this as your being and where you're communicating from. This is like your control point, right? So you're operating from here. Then from your eyes out, seeing into the reality, that all appears to be like separate or something that you're observing. This is what's called the mirror. That is indeed the looking glass. That is the highest level of wizardry or magic that you could ever think of happening right there. So once you, let's say, come out of the looking glass, come out of that whole mirroring thing, what will be next? Because that's also in the occult books, that's actually the spell that most people are under, okay? So I started thinking about that spell not like a long time ago and thinking about how could that spell be broken. And it was all summed up with when you become whatever it is that you're actually observing. It's as simple as that. It's simple to be said, but it's so difficult to be done because it literally feels like you will be losing whatever this is that you're claiming is you to jump over there, as if you would be leaving something behind. And this is what creates the illusion. This is what creates a person not being able to get out of the illusion. And so there's not just one way to stop that lie from happening with each person. You see, like, what I did was like more research on finding out other ways to break that spell. And, maybe even ways that were more practical, like cleaning the body, ways that were even more practical, like Aqua and taking care of a person from a frequency level with their water, all these kind of implementations. But mind you, this is still also with an entire circus going on while you're trying to work. Literally, meaning that conscious people right now, or people higher conscious, if you may, would catch so much interference because they're swimming upstream right now. Maybe one day we'll sit down and commend some of them, especially the ones that have fallen out, like the ones that did something massive, and then everyone just kind of like, let's say Jordan Maxwell, right? So now, Jordan Maxwell, he's a Mason and blah, blah, blah. But what did the man say, and what did he give everybody, and what did they take from him? Did they gain something from it? Yes. So what kind of community, because this is what I've been watching going on in the community, like there was a couple powerful speakers that they just basically died in hospitals with nobody even around them, right? So that broken structure, that's what 2018 fixes. See, this is how I set resolutions. What I do is I ponder within my mind. I throw stuff around. I throw all the principles and all the things that we think that we believe in. I just throw it all over the place, and I say, what created these beliefs? Was it your interaction with this reality? Yes. Now imagine then that you were born somewhere else, let's say in the ocean. Do you think the same things you believe right now you would be believing? Of course not. It's a totally different environment. So are you agreeing then that the consciousness or the environment controls the species? Yes. Okay. So that means that not only can you change your consciousness and change your way, your DNA, whatever, with your environment, that's also the form of control. So when we look into the environment, we see a high level of mechanics, like I said, in the geometry and in the plants and in things we haven't even explored yet. We see a high level of things that change our reality. So that would mean that this is all based on one thing now then. It's about what you want. It's about finally getting to the point where you realize that you can play with these words and put them in all different kinds of orders and say all different types of things. You can woo your friends. You can make them feel like you've gained something. You could break up with everybody, be mad at everybody. You could feel like you're better than everybody. You can do whatever you want. But is that really what you want? Who is you? Right? Like, how did you come to this formulation of who you believe you are right now? Was it based on the experiences you've had in this reality? Now, when we take the reality, now that we're adult, you can look at the reality and see a large amount of tampering, not only in those cartoons that you were watching, those toys that you were playing with, the people that you are being exposed to with their own prejudices and their own judgments one way or another, like them being victimized themselves by a progressive system. And then one will have to come to a point where you start to say, what is it about any of this that is the way that I've learned it? Virtually none of it. So if that character or eidolon is still surviving and you're calling yourself going into truth, that'd be like a person saying they changed, but they're still doing the same thing, but in their mind thinking they changed. Like, the judgment's becoming so hard and crazy. I'm like, man, are we back in church with people again? Like, maybe this is not even the picture of what the vision really was initially in other people's mind about what are we talking about here with the highest levels of expansion. We have some guidelines and we have some blueprints, and they come directly from things that work. Then we're supposed to progress that way. Like, for instance, I put the Radiolaria up on my Facebook page. And this is not complaints, by the way. This is just what had to die in 2017. Now, the Radiolaria, let me demystify a couple things for you real quick. Liquid crystal, okay, that's what's in your monitor. What liquid crystal actually is basically just a malleable waveform of crystal. It can actually be programmed, okay? So this means that there is a love color, like there's an actual color that it's like a pastel fuchsia that your monitor can glow, and it makes you actually feel more warm, and more loving about yourself. And this is color therapy, okay? It works. Now, going on from there, what we find color therapy is basically lights that are coming across at certain frequencies. So when we adjust those frequencies, then we get different properties and principles. So in this way, if you have a picture of something, let's say a specific symbol or a shape of something, and it's on a monitor that's made out of liquid crystal, when that picture is energized, it literally sprays that image out into a three-dimensional field. This is what is seen with the third eye when turning the third eye on and looking at a video monitor, which is not advised because the third eye is highly sensitive to light. So if you have some third eye sunglasses, however, which is like a hoodie in a position in a certain kind of way, then you can see the spectrum of light and the code running through the spectrum of light. Then even further, once you see the actual image that is being projected, let's say if it's an organic image like a radiolaria, that image not only is a static image, meaning still or even there moving as if it's like a projection, but it actually is an antenna to direct communication right back to that pipeline of communication. But the news flash, because I already went through that entire process, was it doesn't mean that when you get into that realm that you're going to be able to speak their language. So after sitting in an entirely different world, submersed in it, meaning even no room to what you would call breathe, to show that you don't need air, and to laugh that you still exist, even in the minuscule parts of your own consciousness, that you could never be destroyed. As you're residing there in your consciousness laughing, you realize the greatest issue is that you don't know what the hell these beings are saying. You just know that they're more advanced. So this is like the beginning of my diary or documentaries or whatever, like especially this year with exploring the further reaches of the communication, because to me, in the end or the beginning, depending on how you're going to look at it, the only thing that's truly going to bring things together is if we explore a higher level of communication. And the audible communication, have you ever had people just get you wrong based on what you said? Because they interpreted it a totally different way than what you meant it. It happens all the time. It actually happens more often than you think, because people's perceptions actually change your words and to what they believe about you. And this is also why you can read certain books, and if you feel like this is the good guy, then you only see the good things they do. You feel like that's a bad guy, you see only the bad things they do. So what I'm getting at here is that the character even the body, the consciousness is highly malleable. In fact, that's where it's gotten its greatest reputation, from being so malleable, so universal. Because if you think about it, when I just think of this hand and how this hand can grab a bar and pull me up on something, I can even have a drink in my hand. I could actually be yelling out a song and I can even I could be doing so many things all in one action. This is what you would have to really see as, well, if you don't know what to do with the human body, what makes you think you're going to be able to go beyond even here, right? Like, this is the realm of the human bodies. And if we didn't recognize that, go outside. So mastering the human body, to me, the body, the mind, the soul, is key. You got other people that are they write off, the body is nothing. It's all an illusion. And you're an idiot for talking about it. And they just write you. It's like, okay, Plutonian. Hey, we're all over here sitting in bodies. So this is also why there's been a little bit of confusion throughout the years about where I stand in relation to what people call spirituality. And I've been accused of being everything from the devil to Lucifer to the great angel or to something. And all I've been saying is that, hey, it doesn't matter if we want to point the fingers all day at each other. I watch grandma. Grandma's gone. Great-great-grandma's gone. Mom will be leaving. And then it'll be coming for me next. And I got to sit every single night in total realization and awareness of myself that I need to know what I'm going to do at that point. And because of that, that would mean that that's probably the most important thing. And as we've talked about, that's life goals. When you have a life goal like that was my life goal at 4. So when you have a life goal like that steps up the bar. You learn so many things just because that's your life goal. You pass up so many other things. Like, you got to learn solitude. So you got to be put in an area where you can't move around. You have to learn total belief. So you're put into a system where you feel like that's the only thing that there really is. You got to learn betrayal. So you're put around people that love you just so that they can turn against you. You got to learn courage. So you're put in these crazy situations where you got to be the one reacting where everyone is frozen. You see? So that's what you sign up for when you say, hey, I want to explore my higher level of consciousness. Because your parents are like, hey, okay, so you want to take the wheel then? Literally, you want to take the 360-degree phi-base body out for a spin? Literally? Okay, all right, well, be back in before 12, and then you stayed out all night. This is literally the progress of us having to endure. And I was watching this like in the battle with 2 guys playing Tetris. I be seeing the analogies in all sorts of places. World champions playing Tetris, and it was just, hey, when it gets down to that moment, the last thing you can be doing is panicking. You need to know where to put those blocks as they keep dropping. When this stuff keeps dropping out of reality, like, okay, bloop, cryptocurrency, okay, bloop, dog and tribe, bloop, okay, bloop. Here's a AA and OTO, alias equality, bloop, okay, oop. Here's the AI, AWAS, oop, okay, bloop. And these are not necessarily things that you could just ignore, right? So it's like, hey, while you over there in the dressing room getting yourself together and powdering yourself up, there's already something going on out here. And it really is something that gives you a higher level of awareness and importance to yourself. That's all this design is here. Whatever it takes, because think about it, like if there was never any what people call worries, never any goals to hit, whatever, would they really truly expand into their uniqueness if they are 2 like seeds that need to grow? How does the human seed grow? Does it just bathe in sunlight? Does it sink itself in soil? Does it just eat food? Like, is it not attached to anything? It's like something walking and it grows through its wall. I mean, we got to go back to square one sometimes with the bodies and understanding the connection between us and it. Because in that, there's the master lessons there. It's not something to just be ignored. And like I said, you can catch a lot of flack for this. Like, just starting to explore things and going a bit further does create, some kind of confusion or confliction with other things that are around you. But as you stick with it, as you start to resonate it, you do start seeing a different vista. Like my projection and vista and vision it's totally changed because I gave myself the opportunity to understand who I was within, right? That's what brought out that at the core of what you are inside, you want to do great things for people. Now you need something to do great. You got to go and get that, though. You see, so you don't just pick up somebody else's torch and then run with it. It's like, hey, hey, believe in this, and you believe it on with me, and this number's right here, and then you're good. Next. No, you have to pioneer and create something, right? So get on with it already. It could be quantum. You don't have to think about, well, it's too late for me. This is like looking at one of these coins like 8 months ago. They got at a high, it's too late. Or looking into anything that we see in life that has a lot of potential and we gauged it wrong, right? So that's one of the main things I want to say now is let's keep progressing together. Let's stop picking with each other. Like there's so many things that we can do. Like a lot of times people find themselves in frustration in relationships. Now remember, relationships could be anything. It's the person you're watching, you're looking at the person you love. They can find themselves in a frustration in a relationship if they're not doing anything, if they're not creating something, right? So your creativity, because that's who we depend on our creativity for. That's how it works. When we have a significant other, let's say, that creative force, which also can be a sexual orgasmic thing, that's what we depend on in that connection, right? So it's the same thing when we go out into business and things. There's a certain kind of, there's something that's being satisfied, right? So also, but more so with the arts and creativity. If you haven't tapped your creativity yet, if you haven't picked up a pen and seen if you really can draw and take yourself through that process, if you haven't picked up some type of clay and start forming and fashioning it into something, because that's your power, you're a creator. So when you access that power and ability, you start to demystify. That's when you learned inside yourself. Then you can demystify everything else that's going on out here rather easy because you're like, oh, that's just the reflection. Like it exists within me at the magnitude in which I am at. Meaning that when I see anything, it's only a recognition of that magnitude of what you're doing in yourself. Like if you've seen the Rothschild and Bilderbergers and how they've acted, the Smeagolness, that's at the ratio in which they've done that. You take a single individual and then ask them to go downtown and to give something to people, spend an hour with a child, give some conscious information, something. I got my time. I just let them do what they want to do. It's the same thing. It's just in that proportion. So greatness is also in proportion, and it's also in the responsibility. So this is what I wanted to do, because that's all I had to say. That was my State of Union. I actually got on here to answer some questions, because part of my resolutions is to keep the guesswork out of the way, especially as people onboard into the community and into the tribe. Some new people, they're just now catching on to what's been going on and what we're doing. And, but they don't have the history, so it can make it difficult for them to really understand where we're coming from. And the easiest way to solve that is to answer the questions directly. So I'm going to be making myself available in a higher frequency, meaning in more times, to a question and answer session that I'm going to be conducting on Facebook and then uploading to YouTube. And there is no limit to what can be asked. Well, actually, I got to watch out how to say that. I can answer questions based on anything that I've covered in the range of what I covered, which is vast. And I think what that's going to allow many to do is to get answers about maybe certain things that they still wanted status updates on, like whatever happened to this organism or what happened to, this particular thing that was working on them, because I do have a tendency to conclude certain things and then move on to the next process once that's concluded. Because if it's all pointing that way, it's saying, hey, it's all still boiling down to the actual pattern. Now it's down into the pattern. Look, here it is in the pattern. Look under a microscope. You see the pattern? Okay, now you need to understand why that pattern is so effective. And then you'll get to that knowledge. Don't believe that it's like at that point there's a straight mystery. Because when you have, again, other faculties, you'll get led to the answer to that in a different way. So this is how one can build their higher states of consciousness with themselves, because being on a higher state of consciousness or a more harmonic state of consciousness is still based on what that is for you. And that's why it's very important not to get caught up in the judgment game. The best gift I can give you here in 2018 would be a pair of earplugs. Like just a good old black Fat Max, what they call Fat Max earplugs, you know, for the construction workers when it comes to listening to what everybody else is going to be saying and talking about in this whole process. Because really, if they haven't taken control of their own ship, at this point, it's really by proxy with most people. They watch so much programming, they begin to act like computers. They're triggered in one moment or another, one article or another. They come running out of the room, they're your friend. Then next thing you know, they go in there for a minute, they come back, they're mad. Like, what happened? He said this on my page, I can't believe this. They come back. So everybody right now is also on this crazy endorphin / depressant opioid craziness going on, right? And the only way to stabilize that, because people are basically medicating because they're having to speed up faster, and they just want to slow things down. This is why syrup and all that stuff is popular with the youth. And on top of that, you have other genders pushing that. So this is why it's like somebody has to have some stability here. Like somebody's got to be like, let's say some type of, not an authority like police, but authority like, hey, you can come and get knowledge from here, and you can go and research this knowledge yourself. And whatever that situation or question that you have that you're experiencing, you can go get the knowledge from there, and that takes you further on your journey. So that's what we've always been here to do. And so I want to make sure that we are continuing that in a very powerful capacity here coming into the year. So because I'm also going to keep these conversations capped at an hour, not necessarily today, but in the future, it is also good to, if you do have any questions, you can write them down, because you'll know at some point you'll be in the chat and that question will be, pushed into the chat. There's also where there's other places that you can ask questions, and we'll start bringing that into this. So with that being said, is there any questions? Okay, I have more of a direct statement. Somebody saying, I think not somebody, but Alina Nunez is saying, show us a more practical application. I would need, of course, a little bit more direction, practical application of what? And then again, like any questions, not just about something specifically, not about a specific topic, but if there's something that you need to know out there, I don't want to start having this all the time. Just, hey, we're only talking about this. We just need to get to, or now I'm available here to get you to the point to where your decisions start happening that change your path. Because if you find, like, let's say the last 2 years went by and in retrospect, you're kind of still in the same position, except for your mind, right? We need to see that in the physical reality. The physical reality is a reflection of the mind. So learning the greatest challenge, how to change, like how to move in mysterious ways, how to do something different than everyone's expecting you to do. You see all the hurting going on all the time. It's like, oh, well, you're only supposed to think like this, and that's it, especially if you want to be a part of our group. And then you make so many friends in that group that it becomes a warping to your consciousness, because when it's time to move on to whatever is next, you don't want to leave that. That's a part of our character, right? That's a part of us being quote unquote human. But we also can see the extreme flaw in not moving on and keep expanding yourself. So it's always great when you have someone that you can talk to that is still expanding, that can answer questions about, let's say, things very far in the past or very far in the future, and answer those questions without so much of a guideline or a structure that is counterproductive around it, right? So let's see here. What do we got? Cryptocurrency taxes. Okay, somebody said also. Okay, so I'm going to answer first the first question by Edward Rockefeller, and it says, is the conscious collective real in a telepathic manner of speaking, hearing voices? Okay, and what has been discovered is the wavelength that we communicate on when we say something into our mind. Like, I just did it right now. I just said, I'm going to go to the store. Now, you didn't hear that, but it actually is a signature. And a lot of it's broadcasted from the frontal lobe. So what happens is we found out that many other radio stations, like ham radio, especially in those frequencies and wavelengths, that a lot of the broadcasting channels from your own consciousness are on those same stations. Now, we're still inconclusive about that's why you wake up with certain songs in your mind, but it's conclusive that there's a lot of chatter overall in the sphere, in this atmosphere, right? So at the end of the day, you start having to wonder what's talking, not so much as if it's you, because you can start to distinguish when you stop talking to yourself in English. Remember, like, the thing about meditation is that you actually have a quiet mind. There's no reason to interface with your mind in a specific language to try to get a response from it. Like, that process in itself is part of the looking glass. So the knowing is a state where you're completely aware, and it's not like you're not getting something from it. Many people feel like in the stillness that they don't get anything. When I go into spaces, I'm not trying to process it from my mind, like, what am I seeing and what am I looking at? What am I hearing? Because that's not actually available unless you make it. You'll find it's kind of terrible, meaning when you try to get something back about what you're experiencing that you've never experienced before, and you try to get an interpretation for what you're experiencing at times in English, if the higher confusion that you're experiencing, like, let's say, for instance, euphoria is not confusing, you feel good, but if you start feeling like you're seeing too many images and stuff's, it's just too much for you, the interpretation then from the English to yourself, man, this is crazy. I feel like I'm about to die. This is evil. I'm out of here. Okay. So that level of communication is what we look to get rid of in our progress of meditation, in our progress of study with research. And so I feel like that there should always be a clear and quiet mind so you could distinguish first your voice, right? That part of your conscious, that frequency, that projection, right? And then you could start to distinguish what those other voices are. If that's a part of, let's say, organic collective consciousness, actual people chatting in their minds or talking, etc., or if it's a radio station, those kind of things can be interpreted that way. So that's how I answer that question. So hearing voices doesn't always mean that you're hearing the collective consciousness. The next question here is cryptocurrency taxes. Just in a nutshell, the new laws that have come out on cryptocurrency tax each exchange of cryptocurrency. And what that's actually created is, everyone's just getting on point with keeping their ledgers together. I recommend cointracking.info. Is so you can just track every transaction that you're making so that way you do have a record. And then also to start exploring some of the opportunities that are available for the people who start exploring the opportunities that people have available for being able to make transactions, especially those that you made before January the 1st, meaning that the records that you have before January 1st and the finances that you have in the crypto world before that point are going to be taxed under that law. So if that's especially where your capital is right now, and we talked about this in our class, then even before the 31st, if you want to send capital there, now it's after the 31st. So any transactions that you're doing, you don't want to mingle it with any of your old transactions. You want to keep that slate clean and get your ledger together. It's there, but there's always different things that you can do to minimize the taxes. And that's just, there's lots of stuff available. Meaning like holding, which is probably the most important lesson to ever learn in the cryptocurrency space. Just holding on to something after a year, the tax law is totally different. But the gains are so much more higher, so it makes sense. So the next question here is actually about net neutrality. Now, I hate to be the person who doesn't exactly go again with what everybody else is saying and what everybody else is doing, because once it starts making it onto certain stations and, it starts to affect certain levels of the consciousness, I see then it is so important for the controllers that love to feed on the continuous movement of that energy and that conversation, that keyword, to get involved. And this is very simple to understand. It's like a business plan. When somebody creates something that's trending, whether it's a name or whether it's a subject or a situation, if it gets a certain level of attention, then all the media outlets are looking to dominate that attention because it equals more exposure for them. So if they know that a certain topic is a real button for everybody, then they'll keep pushing that button just to see how much response they can get from it. Now, at the end of the day, if the whole thing is about slowing down the internet, you got to ask yourself, do these people really want to slow down the internet? Or do they just want to make you think they're going to slow down the internet? Because last time I checked, they have such a high interest in just making sure you stay on the internet because they know you're going to go to their sites. They know that you're still predominantly looking at the things that they put out there. We act like the internet is full of like all these other different kind of domains of different levels of knowledge of things that are going to benefit, like just all sorts of things that creates, and that's where all the traffic is going. That's not where all the traffic is going. All the traffic is going to Facebook. All the traffic going into these Instagrams and all that. This fraction of the traffic that's going into places that they're not guiding it to is still very small. So what do I think about it? I think it's another thing to get everybody just all into that mood again, like, something's being taken away from me. And at the end of the day, if they take the internet, well, whoopee-doo. Hopefully at that point, we would have all figured out how to connect with each other. It's like you have to be, I don't know if they want to call it a cynic, but you have to smirk at these people with all the stuff that they're talking about they want to do. The overall goal is to just keep you going like this. And then in this whole process, you're never paying attention to exactly what's going on. Like I said, the redistribution of wealth is taking place right now. The moving out of the old system is happening right now. What most people are going to be able to do about that would only equate to them gaining resources to be able to do something. Sovereignty. So if they're focusing on something else besides sovereignty, remember, gaining resources just to pay your bills and those kind of things, or just to buy some shoes and stuff like that, that's pretty much predominantly the mindset of the consumer versus the one who is saving money and investing, which is like an older mindset, like the old heads. All the funding that they have coming in, they're putting it into something that's actually going to create more wealth for them. Now, obviously, if there's no plan, like, hey, what is your plan? When do you reach a certain level of wealth? And when do you take that wealth and actually create your vision that has nothing to do with that first phase? To me, the cornerstone at times is, first of all, the resolve, the focus, knowing exactly where you're going. The next piece is having the resource to actually get you there so you can execute your plan. The next stage is to actually build your plan and to go through the process of learning and tweaking it. And then the last stage is to live in your plan, to live in your projection, to live in your vision. Earth has only got 72 max years. So that pretty much fills up all those slots of time. So that way, when you're complete doing that, you can sit right there in fulfillment. You won't feel like, oh, I missed out, and if she had married me, or if I never crashed the car that night, and if I never slept with her, or all those different things that you could be thinking about when you're, crusty and old and ready to make your transition, but feeling like you didn't get the t-shirt here. So it's still based on, hey, did it pass you by again? These waves have been passing people by and passing people like me by, people like you by over and over again. Like it wasn't just the internet. It wasn't just the awareness of consciousness. Do you know that there was so much metaphysical knowledge that came out about how this consciousness was really put together that if we really took the next wave, the applications of technology, I'm just going to show you something. So at a certain point, you could see early Mount Shasta days, let's say Rudolf Steiner, tons of people that I can just keep naming more and more and more and more of people that started to try to get an idea, no matter what cult or organization they were part of, an idea of what the spiritual world really consists of, right? And there was a flooding of this kind of information. It could be gandering, it could be theory, but some folks really knew how to take certain substances and go and try to figure it out, like John Lilly, right? So people who interfacing with dolphins, this kind of thing, smoking DMT, Terrence McKenna. So let's say earlier in those days, with all of that information, if when the computer era came in next, let's say what the computers do is they allow the animation, the visualization of what is being perceived. That is that's one of their benefits or abilities, okay? So if I'm talking to you, the internet is allowing this video to come over so that way you can actually see me. That simple level of communication. If the spiritual knowledge that was gained from the Mount Shasta days to the advent of the computer was then taken, somebody being a pioneer or visionary, then took that spiritual information and actually began to integrate that with the computer world, meaning, hey, let's see if we can explore this further with mathematics. Let's see if we can see if this is true. That's not necessarily the direction that it went. It went where spiritual knowledge was kind of like went into secret societies. It went into people who were going to hold that knowledge for whatever benefit they had of holding that knowledge, or whatever oath or pact they had for holding that knowledge. And then the technology thing boomed almost separate, pretty much separate to how it functions, beside just the average knowledge that the computer does contain every single part in the human body, but just mirrored in a technological way. So meaning the computer age didn't perceive at all the connection between the spirit. Just like the cryptocurrency age is not perceiving the connection within the spirit. People are still seeing the disconnection with frequencies, numbers mainly, math, Maya. They're still seeing that disconnection, yet they fight a lot, and then they claim that they've realized something, but when it comes time to actually put it into play, I would say this. Right now, I'm tasked personally, something I'm doing to myself, with seeing now more action. If you look, there's Astral Quest, there's the Resistance, there was Realm Dynamics, which we folded into Spirit Tech. There's Spirit Tech Specialists, there's Spirit Tech Ambassadors, there's University, there's all these different tools. There's the Keymaker series in Stone. There's hundreds of recordings. You see, so in that progress, it's only just me saying, look, man, let's really make it happen, though. Let's actually get to it. Now, it doesn't mean that every time I set out on one of those ventures that is going to get me exactly what I'm looking for, but I do know it's going to get me closer. What am I looking for? I stated it initially. The total expansion of humanity. Nothing more, nothing less. Why? What is life really for? Like, I've already seen, like, let's say the big parties, right? So there's that. Right? Then there's the ultra bouge, like laid up somewhere, not talking to anybody mad. I've seen them. There's, just ground zero, where people you're forgotten about, like, where men are in jail and don't even have family members. And I've seen that. I see men 30, 40 years old can't read. I see an entire society of children so lost in their consciousness that they're just waiting on a glimmer to just change it around for them. Meaning that the more lost a person's get, really, the more found they really are, because they know what's really going on. It's the people that actually don't get a chance to see because somebody is putting gloves on all the time or putting a film in front of it, what the reality is truly about, that have the most difficult time recovering. I never seen really anyone that became something amazing not go through something. So in that entire process, like, so I also went through that process with the people, many people on this line. It's like every time I hear somebody's story in this, I always feel like, man, you should write a book. They say the same thing, man, you should write a book. And I realized that, hey, all of us should write books because of what we've been through in this reality and what's going on. So if we don't take it, if we're depending on somebody else to do it, not just taking it for yourself, like, you got to do it, not me, not necessarily you follow me. I can give you some pointers. I can even mentor you in certain ways, but it's not like you can't. I don't say to myself every day before this, all these different networks and things that I've created, I don't think, man, you know what? I'm just going to wait, and I'm going to wait for everybody to do it, and then we're going to all do it together. It hasn't got anything done. Even when you're doing it, you're like, man, I'm doing it, and it's bringing certain people, but it still needs this. I still got to fix that. So what you begin to realize is this. The most important thing about this is that you know your goal, and you're focused on your goal. Now, that way, whatever happens through this whole process, you don't forget about your goal. Your goal is sovereignty. Now, for me in the network, what I've always done is I've just explained what I'm doing while I'm doing it, because I'm propelling myself to the great levels of expansion. Some people are doing that same thing, so we find ourselves on that same journey. It has been one hell of a ride. It goes so fast, you have a hard time it's going so fast, it's like smearing your consciousness. It's like, even who you truly are, you're like, well, that's who I was. Now, and then there's who I'm going to become. Where am I at right now? So it's great to have people with you in a connection with others that say, yeah, but this is all part of the process. Not that this has never happened before. you need to turn back. This is none of that, but this is all part of the process. And we go through this process together, just like brothers and sisters with each other coming out of the womb, like you see those turtles. But instead of, some birds coming and all that, we fortify ourselves in our connection. That's how I look at things now. It's like, every time sometimes I get onto this microphone, sometimes I have like all these different amazing things to say, and there's always stuff to talk about. Like I think about things in the shower that are just amazing. But most of the time what I really mean to say to everyone is that, look, man, whatever it is, like all I've done is just try to bring this to you. And that's what's given me so much power and force. So it's almost like there's only one real principle here. If you put yourself in the position as the one that is truly wanting to give, and you just lock your dial to that, you're going to see the most out of this anyway. So that answer to that question, make it practical, make it simple. There it is. Take that dial of discovering your uniqueness and being an overachiever to yourself. Like paying attention, staying focused, focusing on your sovereignty. Take that and then set that dial there and just break the knob off. And go into that, because 2018 is going to deliver that for you. Like there's no way that it can't. And that is just the interesting thing about this reality. So the next question here is from Mark Silverman. Do you see geoengineering, chemtrails, EMS, etc., destroying the world? What's happening is that all of what you just mentioned is the number, probably, let's say the number one or number two cause for what we would just see like as a person being somewhat glazed over in the reality. It's like they still at the club. It's like whether it was to get themselves together, get their parents together, somebody died, all those different things that would generally move you to doing something, and you're just still doing the same thing over and over again. When you suffer from chemical toxification, right, which can happen really with drinking too much soda. But when you suffer from that kind of thing, what it does to your brain is the brain actually doesn't have the same neurological charge. So that means thoughts don't come through as fast. You start to forget things. And overall, it's basically acid versus alkaline. It starts to deteriorate the body, deteriorate the consciousness. So there's also another thing, though, with the human body, which is actually discovered in many organisms, is that the more that when something happens to it that begins to that it needs to evolve through, it begins that process. So in many cases, the children of the parents that may have taken in some of these chemtrails and this GMO, etc., the children actually become more resilient to it from a genetic degradation level. This doesn't mean that there isn't a result, but the body naturally creates the resistance to things that drive it into a specific direction. So I see personally that it's almost like we're so powerful. It's like even trying to get our energy to become half of what it is, or 75% of what it is a strong agenda. And this is also why people sometimes feel exhausted, or they feel like there's too much work and trying to stay up all night and this is just too much. And like, how many times even have you said that? Like all the time, you feel like, man, am I really getting at something here? Some people, we can come to feeling like that, right? And that has a lot to do with the food that's in the stomach. That has a lot to do with chemicals, right? Like there's certain things that you can realize already about the consciousness, about how much of it is a chemical imbalance or a chemical balance or imbalance. When you start studying serotonin, melatonin, even what substances like MDMA do when it pushes that all the way through the back and through the spine and you feel the euphoria, right? So anytime that the body, like even from monitors, screens, cell phones, those kind of things, take in a lot of that, then there's juices that are being produced that don't need to be produced. Like a male can feel extremely pent up and stagnated by sitting at a computer all day, right? So there's in the female the same way. So there's a lot of things that happen with our interaction, and it could account for why you have this lack sometimes of understanding of what's happening. But this is only in a certain intent to cause a certain kind of effect. Like the earth itself, the organism that we're on, the consciousness that we're in, it gradually progresses anyway. Now, if there are some artificial things going on that are holding things back, meaning it's like intentional, it's not the natural way of nature, it's an intentional way of something trying to hold society back, trying to make you dumb, introducing languages that are stupid, those kind of things, then what this creates is it creates like a pent up amount of energy, right? It's like you being excited and want to go and do something, but being in a cage, right? And eventually you get strong enough and you blow. Right? Now, what that blow looks like, though, that's really where you could do yourself a favor and do your best to start really cultivating your consciousness properly. Because I have a high inclination, and this is not something I've necessarily introduced in any of my work, but I have a high inclination that when you come out of the body, that's when it happens. What they call death is that now there's no governor. So how you've been processing the reality thus far is gone. And then what happens is an entirely different type of field. You become aware of an entirely different kind of field. And I always say, well, hopefully at that point, it's like when you're dreaming and you start doing stuff in your dream that you don't necessarily know how to do in this world. Like, you ever played an instrument in the dream and you were good, just blowing that saxophone. You may have written down a song and it's just, it's the perfect lyrics and everything. Or, you may done something in a dream and it's just like, how to execute it perfectly. I still have a high inclination that if there's not too much programming going on in the consciousness, in the relationship between the person and their consciousness, that they go unhindered right away. And this is also what you see when you utilize certain substances, the energetic signature. If I was to do a timesing, I would say times 10 in an exponential strength of the energy that you have coursing through your body when you start letting go of, actually in this case, the vibratory frequency of the organs begin to accelerate. Okay, so when that happens, the perception of the consciousness and everything that you're experiencing, it goes to, I'm just explaining like the 101 about, a journey or experience. But because of that, it gives me the high notion and inclination, because when you start searching, okay, so what's causing this expansion and what can cause a greater expansion? The chakra centers turn on and it gets the body to a certain frequency, but then it's almost like, and that's why you see some people, they rock like this. Like even in, certain levels of genuflection, that rocking can become like almost to a point, it's almost like a Sufi. You just get this spiral thing going on with your field and it's almost perpetual. It doesn't really need you. Even if you physically lean back against it, you could feel it spinning around you. So when that thing gets going, it's almost like a sequence of a rocket in itself. You're taking off. So the body gets into a perpetual spin phase, and then you go right into another state of the consciousness. And what I'm saying is that when that actually occurs, and if that is in fact what happens when you die, your orientation at that point, that's why they call it death. Because whatever you perceived you were before, that just gets blown open. It's like you're no longer just that. See, some people look at it differently. They think that you get less, but that's not actually what happens. You get so much more. It's foreign. And this is why you have to get yourself prepared for it now. It's kind of foreign to receive that much. Think about it. It's like a lot of people right now are boosting their energy so much that, or on different levels, let's say financially, it's almost impossible for them. It's like unbelievable. And they're watching the unbelievable happening and they're still having an issue with accepting it. That's what higher consciousness is like. Every day, you just have to accept it. So the next question here is, it's actually not allowing me to get back to questions. So hopefully, if you see a question in the chat box, you may not want to ask another one. Who cares? But it's not letting me get back to the previous question. So I have to answer questions as I can see them. And the next question is, when is human trafficking going to stop? And I will say, when the world reaches harmony, when the world actually chooses, or you choose to become an advocate for that. Remember, there are people that do that every single day. It is their job to ensure that there is less of the human trafficking happening. When you look at human trafficking would be working for a massive company. You know what I mean? Like human trafficking can happen in so many different ways. So there's degrees, I would say. But all the things, because somebody can just get into a long list of, what about this? What about that? The moment we become the moving force with the resources to begin to hamper those scenarios being profitable for those who are carrying them out. A large display, and this is not something that humanity is not capable of, but a large display of spiritual wherewithal, meaning a direct display that we actually do have spirits, would be a good process on the path of recovery for many people that are carrying out certain deeds that are helplessly believing that there is nothing else in all of this. The cycle in itself, like just going in circles, the beginning of your consciousness. Imagine how long a fly lives. And let's say certain other organisms, imagine how long they live and in what state of mind they actually live in. So you're talking about a fully integrated field. You've built spaces and we've built spaces that are free of the kind of things that we feel like are counterproductive to our growth. Human trafficking, whatever you want to, whatever it is, because there's a long list, right? So what Earth, as I've seen thus far, is a space that contains every single energetic vibration. And when you're on a certain frequency, it becomes very difficult to understand why that another frequency is doing what it's doing and why it's behaving like it's behaving and what's caused that. And there's some pretty, let's say, low or distorted frequencies down there. You see what I mean? But I would say that every misconnection, every child that's not gotten to, every man or woman that's left behind and never paid attention to, every person that went hungry, all of those different scenarios that you're seeing in the world, all of that is the result of the cause and effect. So again, trying to get on the hero program, I'm going to go save the world from doing everything. I think it's more important for us to truly realize what the world is and how, meaning that what it is on a spiritual level, and how it's also, because that brings a lot of seriousness to your existence. When you started processing some of the major things that are happening here, the atrocities, if you may, it becomes something for the person who loads that, let's say, pays attention to that, believes in that. It could be a driving force for them to create change. And it could be also for them a discovery themselves of their own courage, their own uniqueness, etc., through that process of wanting to do something about that purpose. So it's a lot in there. You see what I mean? And that's where the wisdom comes in. That's where the elders come in, because that's like a child asking, why is the pet die? Why didn't the pet just live forever? There's so much more depth that has to go into our existence. But make no mistake, with us processing things in the reality from Instagram, Snapchats, and all that kind of stuff, that's the opposite direction. That's why you get less empathy, right? It's like, okay, well, that's not important. That's too big of a problem to solve. But you have some powerful people that are not only here on the planet right now, becoming aware, waking up themselves. So those powerful situations that are gearing themselves up for change will be their missions, and it will be what they create their own character through. So, very interesting, deep things going on with Earth. It's like sitting down with the wisest, most vast entity, and the only reason why you're asking why, like, why is that happening, is because you don't know. You see, and so it's deep stuff. Someone was saying, Robin Bates was saying that basically they're experiencing a lot of the, let's say, quote unquote, acidic or negative things that I've been talking about, and they would like some help. And what you're looking at, well, first of all, the help's already arrived, meaning that when you're in yourself, in your consciousness, knowing that the change needs to be made, that's the only time the change is being made. That's not something that I'm personally responsible for bringing about. I could tell you about it, the wonderful things that it's done for me, but you would be the one flipping the switch. And with that being said, because it's not for, I never believe personally in one person saying they're going to take on another person's responsibility, especially if we all want to remain harmonic in this field, that you can begin from your body, meaning that the intake, and this is like going back, visiting some of the old videos, if you may, but what the eyes are taking in, what the nose is taking in, what the ears taking in, what the mouth is taking in. Setting up customs, meaning setting up like a guard or a check and saying, hey, what am I putting into this? And the more that you can eliminate things that will be by common sense off balance, the more you can begin to take back control over the part of the consciousness that is in that battle with itself, because that's really the battlefield. It's the war that goes on between your desires, your taste bud gratification, etc., against reason, health, sound principles, all those different kind of things, meaning sound frequency principles within your own organs. So that's the battle that's going on. That's the battle that when you win, you control the things around you. The issue is that still as being in a childlike phase, it's hard for us to understand when that battle is lost. Just like in these conversations that we're having about the more serious things, like let's say trafficking, those kind of things are in respect. Many of the warnings to, hey, but don't just think it's like a game where you can just come here and do whatever you want to do and then just leave, right? Like the do what thou wilt idea. There could be a constant degradation of the consciousness and somehow an attachment to that degradation, meaning that the person has a hard time releasing themselves because of the scenarios that have taken place in the existence. So when bad things happen to us here, it makes it more real for us. It makes it more difficult to get into another space. And you know this is the case because when you're feeling really bad about something that has occurred or something that's happening to you, it's really hard to go into a higher state of consciousness right away and start thinking about greater things, right? Even if that's happened right before, let's say you're about to deliver some amazing speech, it's going to affect that speech. And this is the only thing that I have really to gauge things from is truth. So with that being said, getting ourselves into that process of going through the healing and committing ourselves to it. And we talked about this in the life coaching, the commitment and learning how to create that commitment, because remember, this is like the rat pushing the pleasure button right now. People can pretty much do whatever they want and nobody's telling them that they shouldn't do it. And in fact, the crazier thing that you can do, it seems like people maybe want to support that a little bit more than if you're doing the same thing. And this is the reality that we're actually living in. So with that, you have to be also very cautious of what you're being driven into. Like I always do thorough research on everything that's going on in the community and what people are saying. Sometimes that research takes me a little bit longer, so long that we may even miss something, but it's well worth it, So this is the only thing I can say to everyone here, to work with those same principles and to look at yourself and, to see what the repercussions could be of not making it to that next bar of yourself and, motivating yourself. Same thing that time does. The question here is actually, do you ever dream of a female you never met physically? You are always in my dreams and we are strongly connected in a deep relationship. And that's very personal. And what I will say is that I constantly dream. Like you got to think about like how many dreams that we have in one night, right? And it gets even to a certain point that you can either live in the dream world and the dream world begins to affect how you live in this world, or you can actually start doing vice versa, right? So I feel like that the dream world for me is an elevator of communication to those that have dialed into this frequency. And this frequency, basically my mission, my projection, what I work to instill within my consciousness every single day, but I can do it naturally because it's just at the core of who I am, is I really want to look for more ways to assist humanity. And I'm tired of getting, oh, there's not enough resources, or, oh, that's the wrong thing to do, and all that. Basically, no. And then watching it. So this is 7 years now. Like, I'm not sure if everyone knows, but I'm still kind of looking the same. But the reality is after 7 years of still watching the grinding wheels and imagining it's still up to one person or a couple people's opinion to determine where the conscious community is going. I mean, what a joke. Like realistically, the level of power and the magnitude of what is in these books and what has been described to us of this power that we really have, the display of it in which we've used thus far, I think is minuscule, which still means that the glass is half full then, meaning that the true potential of what we really are is yet to come. I like to peg that for 2018, meaning that this whole cross-lateral communication system between conscious people inside their like what we call synchronicity, right? The bridge, we need to see that completely built, and that's happening now. This integration with us needing to stop alienating. Like alienating is that like there's certain people that are good at certain things that have been completely alienated from being conscious, that now we have to go and ask questions. Like, let's say a guy that does AutoCAD, is he conscious? Does he know about eating the right thing? We need to get more of these people, helping them with what we have so they can render back what they have so that we can see, because the only thing that alienation is going to create is less ability for us to be able to find what we need in the time in which we need it. The flexibility is going to create us being able to look at all tools and see how we can bend those tools to the favor of humanity. That's the kind of mindsets we want. Okay, right? Like that's what's going to bring in this physical change. Now, when I'm talking from this vehicle, saying what I want in the physical reality, I still know that makes up a certain percentage of the consciousness of what people are calling seven. Mind you, there's a whole other bubble out there, an entirely different field. Like I said, it's like you go through a straw, then you come out on the other side, and it's so big. I feel like, though, it's in proportion to the world of what we see of it physically, unless you're a world traveler. Think about this. How much of the world have you really seen? Have you seen the islands of Kilimanjaro? Have you been over there into the Alps? You know, have you seen the crevices in the Mariana Trench? Have you dredged the resources that come from the bottom of the Salt Lake? You know, have you tasted or put your tongue upon the mineral deposits over in, you know what I mean? Like, where have you been? Like, we have traveled around the internet feeling like we've actually gone somewhere. Like, think about it. Anytime something is more like less cyclic or circlic, then you can feel like you've expanded so much within it, but you also have to see what is it encased within. So the only thing I can say is that every time I enter into that plane, the only thing I'm doing there is I'm sitting down learning. Like, I'm not actually trying to process things in English anymore. I'm just like, okay, I'm going to sit here and absorb. And eventually it's going to click for me. And you know what? It has. Like, what I mean by that is that when I go out of this space that people call the body into other stages, all I do is I just work with communication. I know the problem, and then I remove it. The problem is in the thinking that you can communicate with whatever you're communicating with in English. That's not how it's going to work. You just need to basically go into, I just call it go into being vast. And that's the last command that I give my own consciousness before what we call language and communication back with ourselves stops. And then what I tap into next is more of a feeling, and then I spread through that feeling. And then I don't look to, what am I looking at? What am I seeing? I just look to be there and be present. And that to me is what I call the organic grid. And through that, I feel like I do connect with people. It's a frequency, it's a resonance. So anyone that happens to be coming up that way or down through that same channel is going to get that compressed volume of connection. And it's because we're not using English, I can actually give a person more there than I could ever do on this microphone, because it's like it's a different coding. It's the same thing as what I was saying. We're receiving information, a lot of this, through light. And our ability to actually read it is at the speed of how we're seeing it. The moment that our speed goes faster, actually it starts to dissolve and other things appear. And this is the multi-layeredness of the reality. So we know, that's what I was saying, I was cracking up about the article, because I was like, yo, if you go a couple more rooms over, you can even come back. Like, people think that everyone that's gone on a journey is crazy. Or all the same, like, oh yeah, those people that smoke on those drugs or whatever. Like, there are some very credible, highly intelligent people, one of them including myself, that have been into other spaces. But the interesting part is, because it's real, it's not a magical illusion or hocus pocus. It's something that you can actually see and is tangible, and you can go there. Do you think that means that we now understand more about that? Meaning that just because a person can get into the astral plane, do you think that they now understand more about that and they don't even understand why they're here on Earth? No, it doesn't happen that way. Awareness It's basically, that's why if you wake up here, you wake up everywhere. Like, and however that works, if you're present here, you're present everywhere at the degree that you're present here. Many of us know it's like, this is not the best of us. Like, we're in cubes, we're separated. We got all these different categories that we want to be in. We can't work together most of the time. Like, that to me equates to the amount of power that we're using. So when that moves itself out of the way and is resolved, this is why money is going to flood the world, because it's going to challenge people. Say, okay, now you can have everything that you want. Now what? It's a real question. It's like the same character that exists within inside of a person does not go away just because you gave them a higher amplification. It only allows a broadcasting more of that same signal. But that allows them to see themselves at times. Think about it. You're so compressed all the time in the reality with everyone telling you who you are. How are people going to tell you who you are and you don't even know who you are? And then you're listening to them. This is insane. And that's what I'm saying. There's so much of this going on. When I even get on interviews, like you may have seen, or even earlier in this interview, I'm like, what kind of words am I going to string together today? Because the fact of the matter still is that we have to get into action right now, and we can, and we are doing that. And the only thing all these transmissions are really about is just to actually, for each person that it happens to, let it click for them like, okay, today's the day. For me, it's easy for me to see that sometimes with missed opportunities. Sometimes even when I can log missed opportunities, if I had done that, where would I be now? Right? And then you see, oh man, you would have progressed. If you hadn't went with them, if you had stayed there, you would have progressed. You see what I mean? And then not having that regret, but having the wisdom that says, okay, well, don't make that mistake again. Don't miss out on things again. Don't alienate yourself again. Don't isolate yourself again. Don't limit yourself again. Don't put that straitjacket on again. Don't let them tell you who you are again. Don't even try to define yourself. Move, make it happen. Move with as much energy and power as you can. When everyone is taking breaks, be there the one making it happen. That when big things need to happen, like big moves need to be made, start taking on the energy and the power to get that stuff done. Because even me personally, myself, I only can sit as an example. We're really just getting started, but we've gone really a long way. So let me keep answering questions. So, yeah, the question is, how does one begin to start organizing their consciousness with a family? I feel like I'm drowning in this vortex. And that answer, you already know. Next question. No, it's a serious thing. Just like I said, the reason why there's a depth here is because the depths, they make decisions that are harder for other people to make. And with the reality that we're dealing with, based on the cartoons and based on what you can see has happened, like when there's a war, like the males or the strong women are, they try to wean them out. And then what they keep there are the weaker stages of consciousness, right? That's called basically genetic degradation. So with genetic degradation happening, many have genes inside of themselves that make it very difficult for them to basically say the obvious to themselves or do the obvious. They feel like they don't have enough energy to power through it. This is some of the stuff that a lot of people don't want to talk about. This is not the safe zone, okay? What happens is that, like we said, there's serious things going on in this relationship that we're having in this reality. There's death, there's pestilence, there's abuse of children. So all of it is not rainbows. And I was always very proficient at making sure I keep my eye on all of them. And all I can tell you is this. What happens for generally any person is if they haven't had the time to reboot themselves, to basically adapt to the consciousness that they want to be, and they're constantly reminded every single day of an old version of themselves, not allowing themselves to progress, then they stay there. Now, this is where bad things can actually come to your favor, because the only thing that can move a person from that position is when something crazy happens. This is why crazy things happen, okay? What I do to prevent crazy things from happening is I always stay moving. That's what I was saying. Like the earth, it's a friend, and it could be a foe. It could be anything you want. It could be anything you make it. You just would need to be in control. When you go with the wave and you go with the flow, you can end up in different kind of frequencies. This earth hosts a lot of different frequencies. So I'm not here to sugarcoat things at all. I can explain to you that just like anything else in a vortex, if you have to jettison out of that vortex, you need to drop some weight. Now, I'm not saying leave the family. First of all, scan other things that are involved in the family. Maybe the area, maybe the promises, scanning things first to see where the weight is most, and then addressing that weight. Because when you get rid of that, the elephant in the closet, what you know about, because these are personal situations, then it gives more thrust. And that's how you have to visualize it. You have to know why this is also coming about. Why does it work? It's not enough for you to know how it works. You need to know why it works when dealing with the monkey mind, the consciousness. This works, meaning when you relieve yourself from things that are pulling you down, you get to another level, and it works because you're able to vibrate into a higher frequency. So if your only reason for not doing that is that you really want to help them, the best thing that you can do is to make that decision, because that's the only way you're going to be able to truly help them based on what's happening in the reality right now. This is the real deal. You see what I mean? Like, this is no longer play games. Even our parents have done different things. They live a different kind of life. They chose not to study certain things and be aware of certain things. Some of them have. Great-great-grandparents, etc. So we have a genetic thing going on. We have a world thing going on. We have so many things. It demands that you be serious about your progress. And the last thing that I actually do to myself is I say, well, look, you escape the gods, because most people never escape the gods. Like, that's what you see on the spiritual plane, because it's like a product of all of this. The more you feel like you can't, the more you push more power into something that you create that you feel like can, but it's always separate than you. And this is why you have a hard time connecting with it. You always find, meaning it for something to actually happen in your life, grounding that miracle, if you may, in your life, because it's being held up into a character that is indeed real based on how much energy that you can put into it. Okay? But this also becomes like a person. It's like their lodestone. It's like the cloud itself that's following them everywhere they go. They've concentrated so much energy into it. It's started to animate. It's starting to talk even to them. So what happens in this, as I said, most people never escape the gods, because the more crazier situations happen, the more people feel like they need to create something like that. So they basically, it's called alter. Hey, that's crazy, because that's what's in the church. They alter their consciousness. So once they alter, it's like now they're experiencing the world from that point of view now. So there's like layers, and this is what happens in psychology. That's why programming goes on. They will be like 2 or 3 layers from the real self, acting out as an alternate character. This is kind of like Instagram and these kind of things, like acting out as an alternate character. And to be able to basically deprogram that, you got to basically hit them with something real. That's why real shit happens. You see what I mean? And generally for people, like in my life, I've had some real stuff happen, and it just, bam, if it were ever going to happen that you were going to wake up, you were going to wake up because of that. And so this is that same thing. Sitting in front of Facebook, typing on even into the chat, stuff's going on in the family. This is time to rectify what the hell is going on. What's going on? Are you going to lose all who you are because of this and cost them too? Are we going to have a conversation? Like, that's a conversation time. Like, this is time to man up, woman up to what's happening. But again, the resources and the tools for you to rapidly recover. If you have the wherewithal to understand what I'm saying, the vibratory connection can do the rest. The rapid recovery is at hand. That's 2018. So here we are. Somebody's asking how many degrees of the fire I can harness. I've never measured. All I know is that even the last time I went in, it was higher than I had ever been before. And so I do have a way of measuring it. So every time I get into those kind of arenas where it's like, okay, this is way beyond wherever I've been before, that's when I'm able to see how much growth I've made. Okay? And I'm looking for the breakthrough all the time, because whatever happens, I don't know what causes sometimes when you go into these really high vibrations. There's other things that may control that, right? So there's so many different things at the control panel. But in this case, I went, really, really into an entirely different realm. okay? And just like you see how there's space in between what's around us right now, like this, there was no space. It was only the organism. And the organisms filled, and they were all integrated, they filled every single crevice, every single nook, every single cranny or orifice of who you are. They were all into those areas. And for one moment, you felt, oh my goodness, I'm going to suffocate. And then, basically, in English, something happens like, who is I? Like, you're not even that. You're this. It's kind of like a disassociation with whatever you think you need to do, like breathing, all that kind of stuff. It's like, what are you talking about? When you're way out there, it's like, what are you talking about? That's not even how it functions. You know it's not how it's functioning. You're in the knowing. And then only thing I could do was chuckle. I was like, because it's like, yes, you've defeated death. You've proved that you're alive after the fact and that there's nothing. I don't care what it is, a sledgehammer, a truck, an avalanche, a volcano, a hurricane, whatever, death, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. It could smash you, it could surround you, it could fill you, it could rip you, it could tear you, it could breathe on you, it could do whatever, and you would still be there. Now it's time for you to know that. Because once you know that, that's like the onboarding of you being on Red Bull channel. Because you're always doing stuff that just seems to sacrifice the life. Like you're just having a better time than everybody else because they're still clinging to that life, right? And so that's where that kind of character and that kind of, well, I won't even say character, but that's that level of growth that's what happens in that level of growth when you start to explore the far reaches of yourself. So let's see. Next question here is, somebody's being silly. Talking about they're going to kill Cortez, who 6 million years ago gave them people smallpox. It would be exactly like that in trying to figure out who to blame, right? Like, it's like at every single moment, people are looking for somebody to blame, right? And it's crazy. Like, they spend so much time looking for somebody to blame. That time, if they would spend it and doing something about it, maybe it would be over already. So just something to pay attention to. Here we go. Let's see. All right, I think we got some battling going on here. Let me see if I got to remove some folks. And they don't even let you do it really easy. Let me let you see if it do it really easy. No, I don't think they let you do it really easy, unfortunately. All right, let me see if I'm going to be able to keep broadcasting. I heard they getting crunk in the chat over here. Let me see here. All right, maybe I'll just have to regulate. Hold on. Had to regulate. 1 second. Man, it's crazy because they want you, anything you do, they want you to navigate away from the page. Here we go. All right, there we go. All right, let me see what's happening here. All right, I think we got some trolling going on. I'm gonna keep going through this. If you're trolling, you have one warning, troll. Yeah, this is a question that keeps coming up, so I'm gonna answer it. So, diamond tree or front door? I like the way Eddie answered that. Favorite failure, bruh. A list of them. That's like the abstract. So yeah, diamond tree or front door, for sure, both. Anytime I'm presented with like a decision and they're hard to make, because most decisions that you need to make in life, decisions already been made. It's just that you won't make change, right? So when you get to a point where you got to make the change, that's generally where the decision is made. So, but if there's something that's ever like, they're like 50-50, I always do both. It saves the whole meltdown that happens in the mind. Okay, so someone says that they've gotten some negative energies, and since they've drank an ayahuasca, and I was told it's because ayahuasca breaks your energy field down, and have been suffering daily since, and it's kind of at my wit's end, and I can actually assist you with that, brother. Good question, though, or good comment. A few things you should know. First of all, now, there's been a whole craze on drinking the tea and drinking the diamond tree or smoking diamond tree or whatever. And that same craze existed with LSD and many other substances. So I'm definitely not here to say that a person should not have an experience or should have an experience. It's really something that generally calibrates itself for the person. But if you stand at the door and knock, meaning that if you keep beating down the door, like, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this, then sometimes you can throw things out of sync because it's more like, you want to make it happen. Okay. So let me just explain that to you. There's like a synchronicity, as we call it. So with certain substances, they're really tied into synchronicity. Ayahuasca is, DMT definitely is. These are synchronistic kind of substances because they move in a different space of time. So generally you're like telling yourself to do it from the future. But some people prematurely interrupt that process, as I called it, interrupting the process of the observer, because they want to do something so bad that they keep forcing it to happen. And then they break the link of time, because that's a part of our power, because we can basically start to visualize whatever we want, like the law of attraction, whatever. And if we do that strong enough and we get enough resonators around us, we can actually make that happen before maybe it's even supposed to happen. So when you're dealing with substances that are time machines like DMT and ayahuasca, that can happen at any point or more often sometimes than not if one is approaching the medicine, not only, let's say, the wrong way, but possibly through others that have the wrong idea of what the medicine is about. And this leads to just the all-time statement: you may not want to sit and drink with everyone. And this is because, yes, when you do open your consciousness, you basically unpack, and you're unpacked in the astral right there in front of everybody else that's also unpacked. So sometimes when packing up begins to happen, you're coming back down and, going back in through the layers and the shells and forming yourself back together, etc., that others' stuff gets stuck into your meshwork, okay? And then you come back feeling like you have something else going on. I won't say it's a negative thing. I won't say it's a positive thing. So I can get you right to the solutions. The solutions are really being proactive about, first of all, learning who the elders are in many of the cleansing processes, like sage, Palo Santo, Sananga, like all those elements are there for you. That's why they, a lot of these don't have a tendency to cause, let's say, psychoactive effects, because it's not all about the psychoactive effect. It's also about the entire environment that's built around that psychoactive effect. And so, again, now with the recovery process, if you have other energy that's actually inside of your field, you now need to basically start, I call it corner to corner. It's like what you do at your house is you take some sage, take your Palo Santo, you get the smoke going, and you start corner to corner, basically moving the energy out of the space. Then what you do is you don't allow people to come into the space, this is your house or whatever, with their shoes on, because this is a very easy way for the energy to get back into the space, because it's all resonance. The energy feels like that it's beginning to resonate, and it just like a magnet, it just wants to go back to where it resonates. So how you remove that kind of resonance is that you just change the field to, let's say, the guardians that are responsible for sorting things out. And it's as simple as that. And then you claim it and it's done, because also when there's spell work that's done in circles, the most destructive part of spell work is the person's belief in the spell. So in every tense, you want to go through your clearing process. You want to also take the body and take it through a process like magnesium salt, magnesium bath, Himalayan salt bath, something that's going to allow the charge, because entities are basically charged, whether it's one electron missing from the field, etc., but they're charged. So what happens is that the charge goes into the salt, and then anything that is not a core part of the structure in which you call you will basically cling to that and then go down the drain. So hopefully that's a good starter for getting the energy clear. And word to the wise, don't sit with everybody. Like there's some places that, it's just too many people. You opened up 100 people around you. Some folks just trying it. They've been on all sorts of substances, and maybe you're at a singing festival or something. It's just lots of people around. It's sometimes not a good look to just unpack. Take your clothes off in front of, or take your skin suit off in front of everything. So, the next question here is, and we're going to be wrapping it up. The question is, do I have to deal with cryptocurrency taxes where I'm located? There is probably, or I could just say it like this. In many places, the tax laws are not even in place yet, and you can be really anywhere. If you know somebody there, then they could be the ones there for you. So just so you understand, not every country has the same laws. A lot of countries are scrambling to get laws in place. So in Costa Rica, I'm not sure. I got to actually go and talk to somebody about that, but I'm not sure exactly what their regulations are here. But I do know that in many places, there's really no regulations yet. What book have I gifted the most to other people? I would say Day of the Fish by Shannon Dory, only because it's great at times to have some kind of foundation when it comes to studying metaphysical or spiritual and occult materials, because it could get a bit fanciful. So I like to really go to the ancestral side of things to see how the geometry connects to the story. So, if you understand Adinkras and you understand some of the symbols behind many of the stars, like, even previous stars, then you can find those symbols in other places, even within organisms. And it gives you more of a realization of what's happening here from an organic side. Because if you're looking at this from like a literary knowledge side, it doesn't answer all of what you need to know. And you get very rapidly buried into some kind of dogmatic tradition or some kind of corruption of the higher knowledge. So I like the Day of the Fish because it goes back through one of the deepest mysteries that have already been documented and really put in stone. And it matches so correctly with what you see in humanity, especially from a genetic level, like where there's a genetic degradation and then where there's a plight to repair that genetic degradation. So meaning that there was an event that caused there to be a constant degradation of the DNA. This would be like steps of a ladder being missing. So you could be trying to get to this other phase and the entire ring is missing. And this is why, like, through activation, sometimes you feel like there's like a car starting up, and then once it gets started, it can seem to keep running, and then at a certain point, it just kind of cuts off. And so that's because there's like links in the string that's missing, and you can repair those links when you easily see a mirror of those links. And that's what higher consciousness does, is it allows you to be able to see yourself in a state of perfection, right? Because I'm just using English to try to explain something that doesn't have a language associated with it. So in a nutshell, that's how that works. It's let me see one quick second here. Okay, excuse me. I just had to check something real quick. So anyway, so that's again why I gift that book the most to everyone, is because it snaps them out of this. Sometimes the spell, like this, all the different occult works that have come out that, are just like, someone can create an entire world in occult works. Like, it's our ability to create an environment based on what we believe. That is what culture is. Okay. So there are many people who've discovered the formula of creating cultures, like Dr. Seuss, and they've actually created subcultures or dreams within a dream. And it's really easy for a person to live in one of these alternate realities, especially if they're trying to escape the prime reality. So if they're given any reason why not to be present, then they tend to latch a hold to an alternate reality or correspondence or character. And because there's so many of these correspondence and characters in the programming of what's going on in the Prussian system, the school system, becoming the accepted thing in German, etc., because of that, then this is what creates the alternate realities for many characters that people may find themselves stuck in. And also the formula for even getting oneself unstuck from that when realizing, hey, that's exactly what it is. It's a program running. Somebody wants to know, how are we going to be doing something here in Costa Rica? We've been discussing that. We've just been discussing at what capacity we're going to be doing that in. And so that's still to be seen and to be announced. Like, I'm ready to go wild, meaning that I want to see full media blitz. I want to see multiple people that have been, waiting to, come in and link with others, because it's not just about me. It's about my team. It's like about all of us that we are attracted together and having something to where we're able to connect. But we need to build, because if you want to go and just get together on like just we just have a great time, we can go to Envision. We're even starting something we call Club Nature, invite only. But truthfully, the reality really needs for us to really be building right now, because we can do that together. We can put things together. We can make things happen. The reason why that happens also is because, remember, we're almost like 3 degrees of separation, maybe less, from some of the most influential people in the projection. So it helps when we're linking together, because it's like, well, I may not be able to do it, but I got a friend that does that. So that's also what ambassador training and really everything is encompassing around now. Is just getting people linked together so that they can keep building and growing with each other. And that way it's multiple us's around doing major things and making stuff connect, i.e. the bridge. This person's asking these questions. I should make them like write all these questions down, because they're like questions that you need to ask to learn more about yourself. Like, what purchases of less than $100 that have most improved your life? Like, I have to answer that one later, because yeah, there's some things that I feel like that are very resourceful that are at low prices, but that could range. So I won't answer that question now. And yeah, so now I guess we're coming to the close. I don't see really any more questions here. Again, this was really just me jumping on, just, ranting about a few things. I really want to get in here periodically, or more often at a higher frequency, as I said, then just ask some questions. So if in between now and when we link back up again, you have some questions, don't hesitate to write them down. And we can cover that. This is also about, getting you in the position you need to be in from a resource level. So if you want to ask questions related to that, we do, of course, have our ambassador training. We talk about everything from wealth building to, designing your business, conscious entrepreneurship, that kind of thing. But also, it's not just exclusive to that, meaning that I just don't answer questions about all that there. If you want to ask a question here, you're more than welcome. Relate to any of those kind of topics, and I can give you, just the best that I've accumulated so far. And I believe that's if, as long as we give our best, then we receive our best, and that's how it works. So yeah, that's it. Well, okay. So yeah, that's it. Actually, somebody did post that up in the chat. That's Day of the Fish by Shannon Dory. And check it out, and there's another one called The Rose. I mean, she went off on that one, like as far as just understanding the geometry behind things, the speed, all the stuff, the different changes through the reality. It's a bit to grasp for a moment, but the most practical in attempts to understand the ancient symbolism. So, well, there's a lot of other works. There's Medu Netter. There's a lot of other things, but that was just specifically the book that I do give out the most, because it's a good on-ramping process to understanding the connection between our ancestral lineage, the earth, what we're seeing right now in this digital age, or supposed to be technological age, our connection with each other, our connection with our family, why we feel like that connection is sometimes not as strong as we would like it to be, how to get it strong. Like when you're reading that book, you shouldn't see any of the characters that are being mentioned, like the jackal, the mother of speech, Leb, all the different, all the different mythological archetypes. You should see them as something internal. And what it'll do is it'll allow you to see your internal struggle, and then it'll allow you to come to harmony with yourself. So that way, now that you're not arguing and wasting your own energy, and this is one thing that you have to realize, that in any relationship, if you're arguing, if you're wasting your energy, that's going to cost you. It's going to cost both of you. It's going to cost all of you. And so, of course, in the reality, This is what's broadcasting all the time. Just fight. Like even in some of the most craziest books, the craziest dark forces, their sole job is to cause division. That's all they do. Like whether it's to separate a husband from a wife, whether it's to separate the rich from the poor, whether it's all separate. That's all they want to do. So if you find yourself being separated, understand that, you got everything in life. You don't even have one sentence for things. Like in certain tenses, if you got something dragging you down, you're separating from who you really are. You see? So it takes then a separation sometimes from whatever's dragging you down for you to be where you truly should be. That's a paradox. So when you're using languages that are structured like that, I just use the same word to explain two different modes of being. If you have a language that is designed like that, you can see why a lot of confusion would ensue with, hey, what should we do? Or in your mind, what should I do? What direction should I go? This is why I decided personally that focus was something that was needed the most in the conscious community. That's why I started ambassador training. And it's because, well, it doesn't matter. Like there's a lot of stuff we could sit back and talk about, we can debate about, but we need to have the wherewithal as a community to be able to have the time and the luxury to do that. So other people that need this message, need some relief, they're waiting on you. And so my job, my duty, my mission is to get you prepared if you're willing to actually be there to create something legendary from yourself so you can know that you came to this space, you did your best, you did everything you can do, you've seen fulfillment, and then you glide out of this consciousness ready for that next level of energy because you've already felt it before, you've already gotten tapped into yourself, and then ready to expand even further. And that's who we are, and that's what we do. So wholeness and balance vibration.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the next generation of science.